there's a lot of forums out there, right? For bodybuilders, guys who want to get interested in anabolics, who want to learn more. And that's where I found, over 24 people to speak to. They're anonymous in the article. That was the only way that people would talk to me. And those guys came back saying how much they appreciated the article. Guys who are supplementing are often stereotyped. There's a lot of cliches out there, and there's a lot of misinformation. And these guys felt that I'd taken a solid effort of trying to sort of show what the community is like that's not in the movies or, in the way they've been depicted in the past.
I'm Dr. Thomas O'Connor, a lifelong powerlifter, board-certified physician, and published academic author. I've taken care of thousands of men on testosterone and steroids, and now I use my media appearances in this YouTube channel to provide education and harm reduction. Subscribe now so I can help you stay strong and healthy.
This is Rosecrans Baldwin. He's a writer, author, and he authored the recent article featured in GQ magazine called "Why is Everyone on Steroids Now?" And I was in that. Thank you so much. And two of my patients were in there. I didn't realize that until they told me, because my manager gave you a bunch of names and you went to them, and then I had no idea. And then my patients, when I was talking to them, were like, "Doc, how'd you like the article?" And I was like, "That was you? Wow." So, okay. Everyone's on steroids. What is GQ? First off, GQ magazine, you work closely with those guys. What do they think? What the hell's going on? Why did GQ do this?
This came about because I was talking to my editor. I've been writing there for a while now, 10 years. And so we're just really have a close relationship. And we both had noticed that in our lives, I'm in my mid-40s, he's in his mid-40s. Neither of us are coming from a weightlifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding background. We're just guys who go to the gym and lift weights, and that's what our friends do too. And both of us had found out about guys in our lives who, without, sort of on the sly, were either getting interested in test, they were getting interested in peptides, and these are guys who are just, I don't know, tech bros. They're not the guys out there trying to put up massive plates. This was more about like wanting to feel fitter, younger, etc. And this is where they had gotten led, but they often had no idea what they were getting into. So we wanted to do an article where I would go out and try to talk to as many people as possible and see if that was something that was happening outside of just our friend network. And it turns out it was across the nation.
What's the response now after about a month?
Oh, it's been huge. That story, according to what I've been told by my editors, the online response has been, it's been doing really big numbers for them. I think it's one of the biggest traffic stories of the year. I get a lot of feedback in terms of anecdotal, response, which is people are just being like, guys who are in group messages, this story just keeps showing up. It was going around on Twitter. It was going around on different message boards. It's just been, and then the response that's been cool for me is because part of the reporting was me reaching out. There's a lot of forums out there, right? For bodybuilders, guys who want to get interested in anabolics, who want to learn more. And that's where I found, over 24 people to speak to. And a lot of those guys came back to me, and they're anonymous in the article. That was the only way that people would talk to me. And those guys, I actually consistently to a single person came back saying how much they appreciated the article, that I had told this. And listen, I'm not trying to, give myself a lot of credit or something. It was more that guys who are supplementing are often stereotyped. There's a lot of cliches out there, and there's a lot of misinformation. And these guys felt that at least this article I'd taken a solid effort of trying to sort of show what the community is like that's not in the movies or, in the way they've been depicted in the past.
Right. You didn't go into this, this immediate, ridiculous danger, right. Because so many people are freaking doing it. And there's different levels of danger. Okay. What is the most shocking piece that you found when you were working on this? The most shocking characteristic or story you heard?
I think, the most shocking in the story was let me do the answer in two parts. One's easy, which is just a very graphic story of this young guy who I met early 30s. I interviewed him in a coffee shop, and this is the kind of coffee shop where the lattes cost $7. So you can picture like the crowd, and this
LA.
this guy fit in perfectly, right? This is not. He's got cool looking clothes. He's got a cool looking haircut. He's got tattoos all over the place, and he's not that big, right? But this is a guy who started using anabolics. He started on test, then anabolics. When he was 21, he was working a shitty construction job. The gym is where he felt like a real person. He had some purpose. He felt good about himself. Anyway, he eventually led up to getting into some real hard stuff. He then started making his own. He then started selling it. And he got to a point where the only sort of unscarred, or what he felt was the safest injection spot for him when he was injecting, was straight into his chest, like Pulp Fiction style. And listen, nightmare, right? So that's graphic and that's scary. But more shocking to me was at the end of our interview, 3 hours later, and this is a guy he's on TRT, he takes some peptides, he still goes to the gym, but he's also exploring dance, he's exploring rock climbing, he's no longer sort of in the lifestyle in the way that he was. When I asked him what his advice would be to some 17-year-old, some dude out there in rural West Virginia or urban Florida who's reading this article, I was like, what advice would you give that kid? And his advice was get into therapy. And when he said that, I thought he meant hormone therapy. And he was like, no, psychological therapy. And the reason is because the whole motivation for him initially, which he would never have acknowledged back in the day, of why he got into using and supplementing, sure, it was to get big, but the psychological underpinning of that was that he really hated his body, is that he suffered from deep insecurity, and what he said is, back in the day, if someone had told him to get into therapy, he would have spat them in the face, he'd be like, that's so stupid, get out of here. But what he says is if he had treated going into psychological therapy the same way that he treated going to the gym, really put in the work to get the work out of it, to get the benefits out of it, his life would have been so much better. So that was a surprise to me.
And big orexia is so vast, and I had it, I still have it, and it's just so huge. And I interviewed a young man yesterday who's a 21, who's openly on steroids, and it's kind of like, the Trent Emperor, he calls him. And it was a serious interview, and he's like, confidence, and I couldn't put this man down, saying that you're on steroids for confidence since 19. How would you know that you didn't have confidence when you're so young? You should be, but kept my mouth shut. All right. So that's the next thing is there any piece of this story that you couldn't transcribe or write, something that was so outlandish or shocking that you don't want to even say a name, or anything really that you couldn't even discuss, you couldn't even put in the article that maybe you could say right now?
Oh, that I can see right now.
Yeah,
no.
I mean,
there's truthfully the stuff that people shared with me. For example, one thing that people shared, I live in Los Angeles. I have friends who are actors. I have friends who are directors. And so I interviewed, for example, there's a guy in there whose name is in there. He's a trainer. He trains big stars. He has big stars on his current client list. And then he had big stars that he doesn't work with anymore. And let's say two of those stars are in Marvel movies, and those guys, used to use. And so I can't name names, I can't blow that up. But I think one of the things that I think you and I talked about this, is that the social media of it all is what puts, in the words of someone else, put steroids on steroids here.
Right.
And when these young guys and young girls go on Instagram, and they see these people with these bodies that they would kill for, and they think it's just all about training and diet and, getting good night's sleep and eating your vegetables and the right amount of protein. And then you find out afterwards, this was supplementation that got them there, or got them over, a certain limit. And so when the kids don't know that, that drives me crazy.
Right. And that's, and there's no one, it's just the guys that we say are the fake natties. No mention of names. You know, some of them are in Hollywood, and you understand why they do it, because when you're on that level, there's liability risk, your reputation's at risk. So just leave it alone. And it's the lower guys on social media that have more to gain. Hey guys, here's my drugs. Like, I'm one of you. And they gain tons on that because they're coming from a position, a lower, social economic, if you will, or position. When you have someone, let's just say, I'll say it. You don't have to say it. The Rock, like The Rock, continually admit, denies he's on steroids. And it's just like, it's understood that he can't acknowledge it. He can't, so I'm saying it, not you. And there's other people again, but it's all kind of like these social positionings that if you're way, way up to this, why would you? I understand. That's my answer to it is, is he doing a disservice to children and to young men that really are enamored with him? Sure. And he's a superstar, really doesn't kind of 1 out of 10 million or 100 million. He doesn't really exist in the real world of people climbing the ladder and trying to train hard on social media. There's so many social media stars with even hundreds and thousands of followers, and they make a good living on it. Look, come on.
Yeah.
But those people they have really nothing to lose because they're not going to get arrested. And they have everything to gain because what they're doing is they're hitting they're relating to people, and everyone's on steroids. So many people are on steroids, and it feels so good for them to have that group, right? It's kind of like a huge social media group support team, club.
Sure.
So, okay, to wrap up the interview, what do you think? Again, I know you're not a bro science guy and you're not a steroid user, but social media it's Rick Collins is the one who said it. Attorney Rick Collins, my friend, he said social media is now just put it on steroids. It's steroids on social media, vice versa. It's just starting, I think, because most parts of the world are out of America and parts of Europe and Australia, kind of, the civilized world, if we're actually civilized at all, is there's other developing parts of the world like the Middle East, Pakistan, I know 100% for sure, in India. These are a lot of people there, in China, that they're coming on board with social media, and they're just the dopamine and the high. And they're young. How can you not? So this is just the beginning, and there's going to have to be some type of discussion of harm reduction, if not legalizing some steroids to what it's. This is the next 20, 30, 50. I can tell you that because the governments that are going to be, the politicians that are going to be there in 20 years from now, they're on steroids. They're going to be either coming. And so just saying no anymore, look at the drug world of fentanyl and all these things. And when you have, therapies and treatments that are going to be harm reduction, if the politicians agree with it or not, depending on what side they're on, you have to do something because we're losing, this is not that extreme yet, but it's going to get there. It's a smoldering disease, right? You take the drugs, you can forget roid rage. This is just, that's really an asshole on steroids. And you can assume there's going to be some change to your mood, but when a young man, typically women are different, but they have cosmetic issues, not to mention health issues. When you stop the steroid and you take steroids, Rosecrans, and you're 18, 19, 20, it shuts down your own production.
Yep.
And then these guys are going to be on testosterone like, oh, when I'm 27, man, shit, I want to get off this train now, man. This is time to get off the train, and I can't. This is the warning. And I like that. Therapy, go for the therapy. But do they have the perception and that cognitive ability? No way. And there's so much there's so much suffering out there. What do you think is the end to this in the next 20 years or the future with social media?
What scares me here when I try to project out into the future, I like information. I like information being public. I like information being accurate. I like information that is reliable. Social media at this stage hasn't shown us to be a good source of reliable, consistent, verifiable, solid information. I'm not again. I mean, like, look, that article, anyone who reads it is not going to walk away from it thinking that I am encouraging the use of anabolics, encouraging getting on test. I did try to be really careful about acknowledging there are things that people really find beneficial about it, you know? And at the same time, there are so many harms. When you think about young people, if I think about myself when I was 18, 19, 22, you know, one thing I wasn't good at was thinking about the future, or at least thinking more than a couple of years ahead. I knew what I wanted that day. I maybe knew what I wanted 6 months later. But if you think about how using affects fertility, if you think about how using affects cardiovascular health and neurological development, that's a hard thing for a young man, again, young woman too, but a young man, here's what we're principally talking about, to be able to think out ahead, especially with everything else going on in their lives. So I don't know what things look like for 20 years from now. I know what I hope for. I hope, because the war on drugs was based on ignorance. It was based on, there's a lot of racism involved in the policies. There's a lot of classism involved in the policies. That's all garbage. I'm not interested in any of that. Again, I would like to see the conversation get wider. I'd like the conversation to have less stigma about it, less stereotypes. You know, I'd like to see doctors Doc, you're in a privileged position here. You know, you've got information that a lot of doctors, you know, out there, they're searching for data that's not, you know, that they can count on, because they're not running into patients every day. And there's a lot of shame for patients going to their doctors. So I just want to see more information. That's what I hope for.
Wow. You know, it is true that a lot of those healthcare providers, they scorn them. There's that transference and that counter transference. It's very negative. It's very angry. And but we're humans, because the doctor or the nurse they have no experience with PEDs. You know, they don't identify with that. Then this monster kind of guy that I wrote a book about, my first experience in 2003, when I became the Anabolic Doc, he was in the ER and he was in AFib and he was suffering and he was in a panic attack, really, but he was in AFib. He had a heart issue, but he was safe. And he didn't know he was just terrified. And he was this big, gorgeous, you know, 30-something-year-old man that's a professional level bodybuilder look, you know, it looks like, you know, fake. The muscles are, you don't see this right now. You do it and you go to the beach, or, you know, Venice Beach. But the doctors were so flabbergasted and they were irritated at him, and they called me down, because they couldn't do the history, because when you do a history from people is like, hey, what'd you take? What are you on? And he wasn't on recreational drugs. He was on tons of steroids. He took Viagra and Red Bull, and that combination of those, it's a cool, I mean, I took care of the guy after. He did okay, you know, but I had to keep him on testosterone forever, you know, and then he's not a patient anymore. This is a long time ago. But the doctors were douchebags, because they were arrogant and they were judgmental. And I became the Anabolic Doc because I was on fucking steroids that night myself. I mean, and none of my other colleagues were. There's a few doctors that are on steroids. I know the orthopedic surgeons, the bone crushers, you know, they played football at Division I, blah, blah, blah. But they haven't done what I've done, you know, as far as putting myself out there in the medical world. I mean, you know, but and God bless the ones that have, but this is why we have to stop it. We have to have this open discussion. And then there's, you know, 20 years ago, it was just, we were freaks. It was a small number. It was just, you're a freak. Get out of here. Get off your steroids. You did this to yourself. Now, is there any difference? That's wrong. Is there any difference in that, or doing it to the heroin user that has HIV or AIDS, and you did this to yourself? Can you imagine that? We don't do that to them. That they come into, it's a revolving door. We tune them up, we put them out, and they come right back in, sometimes on the same shift. Okay? So, because I work in inner cities, I used to. So we care for them, but now the caregiver there are caregivers here, that person's down here. You feel sorry for them. Steroid user comes in. The doctor now and the nurse is intimidated and actually envious because they're gorgeous. They're not suffering. Oh, really? So I've made the point. I've made the point to doctors. Shame on you. Shame on you. And like you said, they don't know. They don't know. So it's a sober drug, but it's equally as destructive as any other drug. It's just the mechanisms and the path of destruction is just can be very different. So that's it, Rosecrans. I thought you did a great job, man, on that article. And it's just, again, we're trying to provide open, information. I am doing it, and it's growing throughout the world. Is under my leadership to be open, and we got to keep young kids off of steroids. That's but I'm, a lot of the young kids look at me as, you're an old man now, Dad, you did it, so it's like, guys, let's just show you your hair, what's going to happen to your hair, your testicles. I know you can't conceive heart disease or kidney disease when you're 21, but that's sad down the road. I can tell you that, because that's going to be sad. But I think I get the young guys with this. You're going to lose your hair, and your testicles are going to shut off, and you're going to have problems with erections, and you're not going to want to go out there and date. Don't get associated with this, because it's a slippery slope, man. It's a slippery slope. Thank you so much, Rosecrans. I hope to see you again, sir, and good luck, and just keep cranking all your great writing.
Sounds good, Doc. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rosecrans.